Welcome to the Rope Walker Radio KNTR Country Show. Play some old records from a long time ago. Maybe learn a little something that you did not know. Tune into the tunes that make you tap your toe. Absolutely all the oldie audio. Sitting in the dark to the radio's glow. It's your Rope Walker Radio. Rope Walker Late Night Show. You know, the thing that separates humans from animals, the cowboy from his horse, or his cow, or his truck, is the ability to tell stories. Philosophers and psychologists have been figuring all this out for some time. Good evening, and welcome to the Rope Walker Late Night Not Quiet Radio Show. We're here at the KNTR Country Radio Studios, and tonight we're going to tell some stories. Well, we're going to play some songs that tell stories anyways. Like I was saying, the educated experts that think about such things think that it's our need to story everything that sets us apart. That's how we make sense of our world, to tell yourself a story that stars you as yourself, every day from the moment you wake up. We understand our lives, linear-like, in a narrative line, starting in our yesterdays and stretching off into all of them tomorrows. And that's why we also enjoy a good story, a news story, a movie story, a book. Remember them? Man, we love a good tale, a ghost story, a tall tale, a sitting around a fire, honest to goodness yarn. For about the last 50 years, though, we've been getting our stories from sources other than songs. Story songs were the first kind of songs and were popular in all kinds of music from all kinds of places until they weren't. Well, tonight we're bringing them back. We're going to start here like we like to do with Bob Wills. This song was written back in the early days of the 1900s. It was written by Jack Thorpe, who was a collector of cowboy songs. The Cowboys was fast disappearing, and Thorpe rode across the West, hooking up with different outfits and learning as many cowboy songs as he could fill up his little notepad with. He published all these songs in 1908 in his book, Songs of the Cowboys. He put this one in there, even though he wrote it himself. Well, in the 100 years since, this song earned its spurs, as it were, becoming a cowboy song classic. This is Bob Wills and the Texas Playboys from 1946. The song is Little Joe the Wrangler.
Little Joe the Wrangler, he'll wrangle nevermore. His days with the remuda, they are o'er. 'Twas a year ago last April when he rode into our camp, just a little Texas stray and all alone. He'd said he'd had to leave his home, his pa had married twice, and his new ma whipped him every day or two. So he saddled up old Shaw one night and lit a shuck this way, and now he's out to paddle his own canoe. He asked the boss to give him work, said he'd do the best he could, though he didn't know straight up about a cow. So the boss, he picked him out a mount and kindly helped him on, for he sorta liked this little kid somehow. Showed him how to wrangle horses and to know them all apart, and get them in by daylight if he could. Showed him how to hitch the horses to the old chuck wagon, and help the cooks in narrow Russell Wood. At last we got them milling and kinda quieted down, and the extra guards to the campfire they did go. But there was one a-missing, and we all knew at a glance, was our little Texas stray, poor Wrangler Joe. Next morning, just at daybreak, we found where Rocket fell, down in a washout 20 feet below. And beneath the horse smashed to a pulp, his spur had rung the knell, was our little Texas stray, poor Wrangler Joe.
Now we're going to turn to a song by Red Steagall. It's kind of along that same theme as Little Joe. It's called When the Cimarron Was Red and on the Rise, about another young cowboy lost. There's more than a few songs along these same lines, because the truth of it is, a real cowboy was more likely to get laid up or killed by bad weather, infection, or getting horse throwed than by any of them shoot-'em-up capers in the saloon you see in all them movies. Here's Red Steagall.
Riding back to Texas from a drive to Abilene, with a wagon, the remuda, and the crew. The Cimarron was boiling red and rising by the hour. It was suicide to push the horses through. Now Cody Bill was pining about his darling Anna Lee. He'd left her crying back in San Antonio. The 1,000 times he'd read the note he carried in his jeans. Cody, darling, won't you hurry home? Now trailing longhorn cattle is a life that's wild and free, and the prairie is a puncher's paradise. But it was dark and deadly in the spring of '83, when the Cimarron was red and on the rise. We were at the wagon, playing cards and telling lies, when he announced that he was going home. We told him he was crazy, he would never make it through, but Cody smiled and saddled up the roan. Then I made him a promise I'd look after Anna Lee, in case he didn't make it through tonight. He turned his collar to the wind and bid us adios, and whistling Dixie he rode out of sight. And trailing longhorn cattle is a life that's wild and free, but the devil's playing hell in paradise. 'Cause it was dark and deadly in the spring of '83, when the Cimarron was red and on the rise. It was nearly 7 days before we got across. The roan was in the shadow of a hill. He was skinned from head to toe and covered up with mud, but there was not a sign of Cody Bill. Oh, I guess we knew that he was gone, but we looked anyhow. We rode for miles and searched on either side. We combed the brush and drug our ropes through every water hole, but Cody Bill had taken his last ride. And I've kept my promise and I married Anna Lee, and the boy we're raising has his daddy's eyes. Someday I'll tell him all about the spring of '83, when the Cimarron was red and on the rise. 'Cause it was dark and deadly in the spring of '83, when the Cimarron was red and on the rise.
That Red Steagall, in song and in poetry, he's a real deal storyteller. Well, at some point, story songs, cowboy songs, and the like got out of fashion. That Cimarron, that there is a fine song, easy on the ears and gripping too. Entertaining to the last, but it wasn't on any charts. Billboard looked the other way. Songs like that been long since retired. Partly it was the advent of the 3-minute song and the radio formatting that done them in. Partly it was a new kind of song, a new kind of songwriting that used language in all new ways. Partly it was our shrinking attention, or the television that brought us all stories all day. There's been story songs in these last decades, but the last real deal heyday for story songs was the early 1960s. This next song is from 1962. You're not going to believe this, but it went up to the Billboard's top 5. And the performer? Walter Brennan. Some of you younger listeners might not know that name, but as soon as you hear that voice, you're going to place him. Yep, this is Walter Brennan, rocking his radio hit from 1962, Old Rivers.
How old was I when I first seen Old Rivers? I can't remember when he wandered around. Well, that old fella did a heap of work. Spent his whole life walking plowed ground. He had a one-room shack not far from us, and, well, we was about as poor as him. He had one old mule he called Midnight, and I trailed along after them. He used to plow them rows straight and deep, and I'd come along there behind, busting up clods with my own bare feet. Old Rivers was a friend of mine. The sun would get high and that mule would work, and Old Rivers would finally say, "Whoa!" He'd wipe his brow and lean back on the reins and talk about a place he's gonna go. He'd say, "One of these days, I'm gonna climb that mountain, walk up there among them clouds, where the cotton's high and the corns are growing, and there ain't no fields to plow." I got a letter today from the folks back home, and they're all fine, crops is dry. Down near them end, Mom said, "Son, you know Old Rivers died." They're sitting here now in this new plowed earth, trying to find me a little shade. With the sun beating down across the fields I see, that mule, Old Rivers, and me. Now one of these days, I'm gonna climb that mountain, walk up there among them clouds, where the cotton's high and the corns are growing, and there ain't no fields to plow. With the sun beating down across the fields I see, that mule, Old Rivers, and me.
Our sponsor this evening, as always, is 10 High Whiskey. 10 High is the whiskey that's kind of brown and comes in a bottle. Kind of like your better tasting and more expensive whiskeys. It's also brought to you tonight by the National Orange Council. Oranges. They're orange and they taste like oranges. Try one. You won't be surprised. The year was 1959 when Marty Robbins' landmark storytelling album called Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs came out. Man, there's some good stories on there. His song called El Paso came out on that album. It was a huge hit. The story of a cowboy dying for the love of wicked Felina was so popular, Robbins eventually wrote 2 sequels to the song. Well, you can hear that song in your head tonight because we're not going to play it. We're probably going to be hopping a little visit over to El Paso in a future show, though. I brought it to your attention, listener, because of the affinity that this next band had for that greatest of modern country story songs, El Paso. The Grateful Dead played El Paso 388 times in 388 different shows. Hey, Uncle John's band only got 332 plays. Friend of the Devil, that's a great story song, 304. Scarlet Begonias, 316. They played Truckin' and Sugar Magnolia 500-something times. But in concert, the top played Grateful Dead song of all time was not a Dead song at all. It was a story song. They played this sucker 616 times. I'm going to play it for you tonight. It's the Grateful Dead, live at the Capitol Theater in Port Chester, New York, February 2nd, 1971. This is Me and My Uncle.
Me and my uncle went riding down South Colorado, West Texas bound. We stopped over in Santa Fe. That's being the point, just about halfway. And you know it was the hottest part of the day. I took the horses up to the stall. Went to the barroom, ordered drinks for all. 3 days in the saddle, know my body hurt. Being summer, I took off my shirt. Then I tried to wash off some of that dust to dirt. West Texas cowboy plays all around. With liquor and money, they loaded down. So soon after play day, though it seems a shame, you know my uncle, he starts a friendly game. Then I load Jack and the winner take the hand. Got so one of them called him, and then two more accused him of cheating. Oh no, it couldn't be. I love my uncle, he's as honest as me. And I'm as honest as to be the man you can be. That's me. One of them cowboys, he starts to draw. I shot him down low. Never saw. Shot me another, but that damn he won't go. In the confusion, my uncle grabbed the gold. Then I tailed it down to Mexico. Love my uncle. Love my uncle. God rest his soul. He taught me good love. Taught me all I know. Done it so well, I can't let go. And I left his dead ass there by the side of the road.
Now that's a good old cowboy story. But it wasn't written by no cowboy. It was written by Papa John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas. You know, he wrote California Dreamin'. Monday, Monday. That John Phillips. Well, it was 1963, and the story goes that Phillips and Stephen Stills and Neil Young and some others, Judy Collins, they were all drinking tequila in a hotel room after one of Collins' shows. Old John Phillips is spouting off like a good drunk that all these cowboy songs ain't nothing special and why he could write a cowboy tale just as good as, well, you know, drunk and blah, blah, blah. Well, he did. He wrote Me and My Uncle, and next morning he had no recollection whatsoever of the previous night's goings-on. He didn't remember no cowboy song for sure. Well, it's about a year later, and Judy Collins is up singing a song in one of her concerts that she credited to John Phillips. He claims to have called her to set her straight, to inform her that he'd never written the song. And Collins told him, lucky someone was running a tape recorder that night, and the tequila-soaked Cowboy song made it into the light of the next day. Judy Collins was the first to record Me and My Uncle. Phillips later joked that every time he got a royalty check from the song, he remembered writing it a little better and a little better. Okay, we got a little minute here to look in the old mailbag. Got a little pissy-issel from Rusty over there in Lubbock, Texas. Rusty writes, Dear Rope Walker, I've been meaning to write in and ask you, why ain't you been cooking on the show like you used to do? I enjoyed that a little. I have used your recipes and even impressed a dinner guest or two with my cook acumen, which I largely credit to your show. Please bring back the cooking. Signed, Rusty. Well, Rusty, on account of the show being a late night endeavor and largely hearing instead of seeing kind of show, we have neglected our kitchen forays. Of course, we'll take your request under advisement, so stay tuned. This next letter here, it says, Dear Rope, I sure would like to hear you sing again on the show. You have such a wonderful voice and God-given talent, and it seems just a crying shame to not be using it like you could. Why, you're just about as good as any old radio singer, and I'm sure the people would love to hear your voice again. It always thrilled me. Always. Love, Mom. Well, there's that. This next song is a special selection from Bob Dylan. Well, listeners, we've come to the part of the show where there's going to have to be some talking instead of rocking. At this point, we had a record queued up that would have propelled our little storytelling episode into the legendary and previously unrealized, undreamed of realms of radio greatness. Alas, it was not meant to be. Instead, it's story time. Once upon a time, there was a little radio guy named Little Radio Guy. He had himself a little radio show, and on that show, he would play wonderful records, and these records would bring joy and happiness to the people. Joy and happiness. That was Little Radio Guy's dream. Maybe someday, by playing enough really good and efficacious music, he could help to tilt the big old world just a little bit on its big old axis and toward the good and beautiful and righteous. One day, whilst going about his radio show business, along came a big old mean Bob Dylan. And he said, in his big old mean Bob Dylan voice, I'm big old mean Bob Dylan, and you have tried to play my music. It's my music, and no one can play my music but me, 'cause it's mine. And Little Radio Guy looked up at that big old mean Bob Dylan and said in a quiet voice, But, mean old Bob Dylan, I wasn't meaning no harm. I just wanted to play one of your songs so the people could be happy and joyful, and the world could tilt towards coolness and righteousness. But the big old mean Bob Dylan interrupted, and in a croaky voice he screamed, It's my music! It's mine! But I'm not making any money or profiting in any way, stammered Little Radio Guy. It's mine! Big old mean Bob Dylan had his cheeks all stuffed up with money, like a huge chipmunk, and his pants were so filled up with money that it was leaking and making little money puddles at his feet. Big old mean Bob Dylan said, It's my music, Little Radio Guy. Joy and happiness be damned. I have decided to block your video content worldwide. And he laughed, his big old mean Bob Dylan laugh that made Little Radio Guy shiver. And that laugh, why, it looked exactly like a big red circle with a big red line right through it. The end. Now that's a sad and scary story, listener, and I'm sorry to have to tell it to you. Truth is, I've been trying to call Bob Dylan so as we could talk this whole thing out, but he won't pick up. He just won't take my calls. I thought we were better friends than this. I really did. But at this point, the radio show will have to be de-Dylanized and completely scrubbed and sanitized against any remaining Sony Music sediments. I will continue to try to negotiate, but I have to tell you, if something don't change here, I might have to forbid Bob Dylan to play any of my songs on his radio show. That's right, no rope walker. It's not a threat, and I'll be honest, I hope it doesn't come to that. But I want you to know, each and every one of you 47 subscribers, I am here fighting for you and for good music and storytelling. Man, that would have been a good song, though. Well, you've had your stories now, and it's time to go to bed. I'm going to leave you with a song by Emmylou Harris, Gillian Welch, and Alison Krauss. A song they wrote for the movie Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? This is called Go to Sleep, You Little Baby. I'm Rope Walker. Good night to you.
Go to sleep, you little baby. Go to sleep, you little baby. Your mama's gone away and your daddy's gonna stay. Didn't leave nobody but the baby. Go to sleep, you little baby. Go to sleep, you little baby. Everybody's gone in the cotton and the corn. Didn't leave nobody but the baby. Don't you weep, pretty baby. Don't you weep, pretty baby. She's long gone with the red shoes on. Gonna need another loving baby. Don't you weep, pretty baby. Don't you weep, pretty baby. You and me and the devil makes three. Don't need no other loving baby. Go to sleep, you little baby. Go to sleep, you little baby. Come and lay your bones on the alabaster stones and be my ever-loving baby.